Jalen Brunson, he's the guy that the Knicks have staked everything on, making all their all-in moves this offseason and trying to build a championship team. But how does he build on an MVP caliber campaign last year? I'm getting into that on today's episode.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day. Whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in sights and sounds on YouTube, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today I'm previewing Jalen Brunson's upcoming season. So we've done all these player previews. We're reaching the end here of the players that need previewing. And Brunson obviously is the top guy. He's the guy that the Knicks have decided to build this entire team around, that they have finally said, we have the guy that we need to potentially contend for a championship. And now it's time to make all the moves, spend all the draft picks, do all the things necessary to make a team that can potentially win a championship. And I don't fault them for it at all because Brunson's been pretty damn good. So let's just do the tail of the tape here. So Jalen Brunson, 28 years old. He's going into his 7th season in the NBA. Last season, he averaged 28.7 points, 6.7 assists, 3.6 rebounds, 0.9 steals, and slashed 48% from the field, 40% from three, and 85% from the free throw line in just over 35 minutes per game. For his career, he is currently at 16.9 points, 4.7 assists, 3.2 rebounds, 0.7 steals, and has slashed 49% from the field, 39% from three, and 82.5% from the free throw line in 28 minutes per game. So I think if we're just looking at the stats, first off, I think the biggest thing that we can, just the basic counting stats, we can say the biggest thing with Jalen Brunson these last couple of years with the Knicks is that he's managed to, he's in Dallas, he got incrementally better, but mostly just kept getting more and more opportunity. And it was one of those things where it was like, oh, well, he's undersized or whatever, like, oh, he's this, he's that, can he keep doing this at a higher level? Can he keep up, good efficiency with more playing time against better defenses, against teams that are more keyed for him? And we sort of saw, like, through his time in Dallas, he went from low minute role player to pretty crucial role player to then a guy who was able to, sub in as the 1A guy in a playoff series where Luka Doncic had to miss it and still help his team come out on top. And so then we saw that build with the Knicks now, where he went from the first year proving, okay, yeah, I can definitely be a number one option, to last year proving, okay, I can't just be a number one option. I can potentially be an MVP candidate. I can single-handedly take your team almost to the Eastern Conference Finals with a team that was missing multiple of their best players, like 3 or 4 of their best players. It was nothing short of spectacular. I mean, he's just kind of continued to defy expectations. That's why it makes it kind of hard to write a preview episode about him, because you want to say, well, this is probably about it, right? Like, this is probably the apex for Brunson, and he just has to maintain where he's at now at this point. And yet, based off how his career trajectory has gone so far, if he averaged 33 points per game this year, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. He continues to just push and push against, what people say that he can or can't do, and find new ways to become even better. So it's going to be an interesting preview here, because I think I've pulled some pretty decent stats that just prove how good he is. But also I really looked, and I think I found 1 or 2 things that he could also improve upon this year too. As far as his on-off, I've been adding this into most of the previews I do. He had it almost comically large, plus 11.8 on-off. So that's how much better or worse the team was with him on the floor per 100 possessions. So the Knicks were 12 points better per 100 possessions. That is elite production. They were, if memory serves me, about 9 points in the good with him on the floor and about 3 points in the bad with him off the floor, which leads to a net of about 12 points per game, or 12 points per 100 possessions better when he's on the floor. So crazy stuff. And he was actually one of the only guys, as I did these previews, that the team actually was worse with him off the floor. For the most part, like some of the role players, it was like, oh, they're 3 points in the good with, Deuce McBride on the floor, but he's technically a -6 in on-off because the starting lineup and the Brunson minutes are just so good that they're like a +9 or whatever. And so, Deuce ends up a negative, even though the team is still a positive with him on the floor. That happened with Deuce. That happened with Precious. I think it happened with a couple other guys as well, where it was just kind of comical, like how good this team is with Brunson on the floor, that it sometimes, by comparison, even can make it look like the bench unit and whatever is not as good, even though the bench unit was winning their minutes too, which is crazy. So, I mean, he's just comically good. So as far as his best game or moment of last season, that's so tough. I mean, I wish that the 60-point game couldn't have been tainted by the fact that they lost. And the fact that Wembanyama had one of his signature performances of his rookie year during that game as well. There was the 50-point game against the Suns, where he was perfect from three. That was pretty amazing. I'm tempted to say that one. But really, I don't think there's much of a comparison here. The best is the fact that he went 4 straight games in the playoffs where he scored 40 or more points, or if you lower that criteria to 39 points or more, he scored 5 straight games with 39 or more. I think that's it. That's what you need. That's why the Knicks have decided to build around this guy, because he did as good as he did in his first playoffs with the Knicks, and how I would say Cleveland was a huge team effort that first year. Like Josh Hart had a big say in that. Mitchell Robinson had a big say in that. Miami was almost singularly Jalen Brunson. I mean, they just became so reliant on what he was doing scoring the ball, regardless of what any pundits last year or currently. I'm still seeing takes about, like, is he going to be the guy to take the last shot in the playoffs? Is he going to be the guy that they can count on in the playoffs? Yeah. Yet he is. He was the guy that Dallas could count on in the playoffs. He's now the guy that the Knicks can count on to potentially win them a championship. I mean, at full stop, that is the case with Jalen Brunson. He managed to score like 30 something points per game against Miami, and then followed that up by averaging over 30 points per game in this past playoffs as well, which is just insane to think about. I'm actually going to look at what his overall scoring averages were. 27.8 in that first playoffs with the Knicks, 32.4 this past playoffs, and looked every bit of it. And I'm honestly in some ways surprised it's not even higher, considering how many times he scored over 40 and everything else. But yeah, he's a stud, and nobody should question if he can perform in the playoffs or not. I found a few interesting stats on him as well. So these just kind of stood out to me as, you know, interesting. That's it. There's nothing bad about Brunson. If I'm being completely honest, you can't really find anything and fault him for it, because the only things that I think are faultable about his game are things that you can't control. Like, oh, he's 6'3" and doesn't have a particularly crazy wingspan. So, of course, his defense leaves a little bit to be desired, but he always tries on that end. He still averages almost a steal per game. Like, what can you really fault him for when he gives you that much on offense? And everything that he does on offense is just damn near perfect. But here's the interesting thing. So uh, it's all related to his shooting and some things, just with his offense. His shooting fouled percentage. So that's the percentage of times that he gets fouled when he takes a shot. It actually went slightly down last year, despite shooting more free throws per game than his first year with the Knicks. So he averaged 6.5 free throws attempted per game last year versus 5.8 in 2022 to 23. And yet his shooting foul percentage went slightly down from 12.9% in 2022 to 23 to 12.5% in 23 to 24. So what that tells me is that he was getting to the rim more, I think, and as we'll see in a second, his 3-point attempts went up as well, which tells you that he kind of refined his shot profile down into the more analytically friendly, like at the rim or from three shot profile that we see from so many NBA players now. But the really interesting thing for me that showed a lot of improvement for him last year. His and one percentage went through the roof last year by comparison. So he averaged 38.3% and one percentage versus 29.6% in 2022 to 23. So almost a 10% improvement on the amount of times that he finished a attempt with an and one last year versus the year prior, which means just basically his finishing got that much better. You could probably say his finishing got 10% better last year because that's basically what that equates to. Like he managed to take something and build on it enough that he was able to not just draw fouls, but get the two and get the extra, get the extra 1 point with the and one rather than just shooting two free throws. That's insanely valuable. His 3-pointers attempted also went up dramatically as well from his first year with the Knicks. So 4.7 his first year with the Knicks to 6.8 last year. So it took almost 2 more attempts per game, yet only had just a really small drop down in overall 3-point percentage, 41.6% his first year from three with the Knicks on those 4.7 attempts to then still shooting 40.1% on the 6.8 attempts last year. Just elite shooting. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he's in that upper crust of 3-point shooters in the NBA, especially for how many he self creates, which I kind of want to talk about more. I think that there is something really interesting to be said about how he gets his shots and how that could potentially be the thing that makes this year better for him than his first 2 years with the Knicks, and how he can possibly ascend to actual MVP status rather than just MVP candidate status. So I want to talk about that in just a moment. But first, I got to let you know about our friends over at FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And the best part is you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So let me try to play odds maker like Gavin has been lately and find a matchup that is interesting to me. I think he highlighted on yesterday's show the Eagles and the Giants, I think, or maybe just briefly mention them. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to look up north. I'm going to go to the NFC North, Detroit Lions at Minnesota Vikings. Right now, you've got the Lions money line plus 106, whereas their spread is it's plus 1.5, and they're only minus 110 odds there. And if you're going to bet them, just bet them to win, go the money line rather than going minus 110 odds for them to cover a 1.5 point spread. Just bet on them to win. I think there's a decent chance. I mean, they're cruising. They're going to catch the Vikings off a bye week. I know the Vikings are undefeated and they've looked amazing with Sam Darnold, somehow crazy as a Jets fan, but plus 106 odds to win, go for that. Make that your $5 bet, and then you can get yourself some more credit. Again, if you just place a $5 bet, you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So you can't really beat that deal. Talk about low risk. So visit fanduel.com and you can get started making some money. All right, and I'm back in to keep talking through Jalen Brunson's upcoming season. And my middle segment has been big question for the year. And if you haven't caught on yet, I think that my question is basically, where does Brunson go from here? Where do you go? How do you improve when you're already so good? When you've already had basically an MVP season, what do you do to improve upon that? Has he reached the point where he basically just needs to maintain how elite he is now, or is there almost unfathomably another level to his game where he can get even better, where he can go from a 28 plus point per game scorer to potentially a 30 plus point per game scorer and truly realize all of those early 2000s Allen Iverson comps that he's gotten over the last couple of years. And how does Cat help unlock that, and Bridges for that matter? But really, just this team that they've built around him, are they properly equipped to make Jalen Brunson a better player as much as he can make all those other guys better players? And I was looking for one thing that really stands out to me, and I think it's spot up shooting. I think that that's the thing that he could definitely do more of because he's crazy efficient at it, and it would allow him to work off the ball in possessions where either Cat or Mikal Bridges or others are cooking and kind of taking control of the offense. I think that there are going to be some possessions cat wise. Ideally, I think you want to work him off of Brunson as much as you can, work that pick and roll, pick and pop, short roll passing from, from all the way up to the 3-point line, let Brunson take his, pull up 3-pointers off of screens. Like there's a million different things you can do with those two guys. And that's why the Knicks traded for Cat, because they're like, we think that having a multifaceted 3-level scoring talent at the center position is the thing that's going to make Jalen Brunson the best Jalen Brunson. But I think that a lot of good could come from Brunson actually having the ball out of his hands more often, especially if the Knicks get in that habit prior to the playoffs. Because as crazy as it sounds for a guy that's been, an absolute monolith for the Knicks the last, 2 seasons in the playoffs with, being like their primary scoring guy, scoring half their points in some games. I mean, he does it all. I think that they would be best to try to involve other guys as much as they can and let Brunson cook off ball a little bit to preserve his energy, to make it so that he doesn't have to run every single possession all the time, especially throughout the regular season. But those skills become valuable in the postseason as well. So his spot up shooting. So let's talk about his pull up shooting first. So in the regular season, Brunson shot about 37% on pull up threes, and that dipped to 28% during the postseason when defenses ramped up and he had to carry so much of the scoring load. So, I'm not saying that he struggled in the playoffs or anything because he didn't, but it's just the reality of playoff basketball, right? Like guys are going to be more aggressive getting over a screen to try to prevent you from making a shot. They're going to, um, you know, be more up in your business, like playing you the entire length of the court and making it so that you can't just kind of have those opportunities you sometimes get in the regular season where a guy sags off a little bit and, point guard brings the ball down the floor and walks right up to the 3-point line and pops a shot because, the opposing defender isn't getting up in his business for the entire, 48 minutes of the game. So, that's just a normal byproduct of postseason basketball is your percentages are going to go down and, your scoring is going to be harder to come by. But on spot ups, he pretty much shot a rock solid 44% in both the regular season and the postseason on spot up attempts from three. So I think it was like 43.8% in the postseason and like 45.3% in the regular season or something like that. So very marginal, the difference between his regular season spot up shooting and his postseason spot up shooting. So what that says to me is leverage that more, work on that as much as you can. And, I think the Cat in particular is a guy that can really help make this happen. I think hopefully what we'll see is that even off those pick and rolls where Brunson and Cat are working, if it turns into a roll situation and Cat gets the ball, hopefully they practice with Brunson relocating to somewhere else along the perimeter with his defender hopefully, distracted by the fact that Cat is crashing into the paint and Cat being ready to turn around, look, ensure that Brunson is open and wing a pass out to him to then get him a spot up opportunity, or just let Mikal Bridges cook a little bit. Like he's shown that he can be an ISO scorer when he needs to be. Let him kind of break the defense down, almost do that like Julius Randle role where he can break the defense down. And if things are not super easy for him to try to get a shot, just start looking for Brunson around the perimeter and kick it out to him and hopefully get him more spot up threes that way. I think that was something that I wanted to see regardless, before the trade. I want to see Randall look to do that more. I want to see, them run actions through Hart and DiVincenzo and have them try to look for Brunson spotted up around the perimeter. Because I think that it's just an area where he has shown that he is pretty much unstoppable. So as far as ways that he can improve outside of the obvious of like, I think it'd be nice to see him intentionally work as more of a distributor this year and, try to take a little and it's not because I want him with the ball in his hands less, but it's more just I want to preserve him as much as possible. I don't want to burn him out. Granted, he doesn't seem to have any burnout. His conditioning is phenomenal. He never seemed to drop in the postseason at all. But it's still if you can work on getting your other teammates involved as much as you can and still be the scorer that you are otherwise and maybe increase your assist total this year and all that and that'll help the MVP case if nothing else too if he suddenly starts averaging like 8 assists per game to go with like 27 points per game. I think that we're in for a good time with him and could potentially have him establish himself in a different way, and work off the ball a little more, but also work on, the assist game. I don't know. Again, everything with trying to pick what you want Brunson to do is just pure nitpicking at this point because he's just such a phenomenal player. And honestly, as fans, we're very lucky to have him on this team. But I want to talk about goals for Brunson this year, and I sort of got into it a little bit. And also my realistic expectation for Brunson this year. So be back in just a moment to get into that. But first, I gotta let you know about our friends over at Hims. And your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/locked on. The products mentioned are chewable compound products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. So goals for Jalen Brunson this year. Pretty tough to find, right? What do you it's like the question of like what do you get for someone who has everything? What do you project for a player who already does it all? What do you project for a guy who already has proven that he's an MVP caliber player, has already proven that he can carry your team in the playoffs, has already proven that, he's a leader on and off the court, that, his teammates respect him. They want to listen when he speaks. They love the fact that he can go to bat for them, in the media. I think that's a huge underrated part of what Jalen Brunson does is that he is like the like the meme of like the soldier standing in front of the sleeping kid that the soldier's like got all this like fire and knives and everything coming in behind him protecting the child. That's basically Brunson. I mean, he is that guy for the Knicks. Like he not only is the superstar on the team that does all the scoring and everything else, but he also is the guy that will go up in front of the media after a tough loss and say, "Hey, he'll make it all about him. Be like, I didn't do enough today, and that's why we lost. So put it on me." But then if it's a big win and they ask him, Jalen, you scored 50 points, whatever, like how amazing was that? It'll be like, yeah, I couldn't have done any of it if my teammates weren't stretching the floor for me or whatever. It's like he's just the superstar. He's the guy that you want to be the face of your franchise. And first off, Knicks fans are just super lucky to have him in that regard. But then the question of what do you set goals as for him? And I think that the main thing is just don't regress. That's thing one. He's just continue climbing. There's never been a downturn on his career graph. If you're looking at like if he was a stock right now, it's only been going up. There hasn't been a dip to buy yet. He's been just going up and up and up and up and up. And there's never been any drop off. And you figure at some point in his career there will be, uh, or at least a plateau. he's got to at least reach a point at some point where it's like he's as good as he's going to be. And yet it's tough to say that he's there just yet because, you kind of thought maybe after the first year, like, oh, okay, he's like a 24, 25 point per game scorer. He'll probably get some all-star nods. He probably should have gotten an all-star nod both years with the Knicks, but that's neither here nor there. Like he'll get an all-star nod at some point, and maybe alternate them every other year of his career, blah, blah, blah. He's really good. Good thing the Knicks got him, this, that, the other. And yet then he has that playoff performance and then has the performance last year where you go, oh no, all right, never mind. He's not an occasional all-star. He's a perennial all-star. And he's now a guy who's should be in the All-Star game every year, in conversation for All-NBA every year, in conversation for the MVP every single year. So that's kind of where we find ourselves now. So now at this point, it's like at minimum, just don't regress because like I think that All-NBA player, that guaranteed, MVP candidate, even if he doesn't get it, um, that's what the Knicks need if they're going to win a championship. Every team that wins a championship has a guy like that for the most part. You have to go so far back in NBA lineage to find a team that, or there's only like one team every, I don't know, like 10 years, if not more, that has a team where that they don't have a guy that's like universally considered like a top 5 player at that time in the league. And even like the last team I think to do that, which to me would be probably like the Spurs 10 years ago. Even with that, it's like, well, yeah, okay, they didn't have a current MVP, but they had, one of the greatest players of all time, one of the greatest cores of all time. They had an up and coming guy who eventually became, a multi-time Finals MVP in Kawhi Leonard, including that year. Like there was a lot going for that team that was outside of just having like one top 5 player. Other than that, though, it's pretty much every team has one, and so he's got to continue playing at that level if this team wants to find the ceiling that they want. So that's the main thing. That's my main goal for him. Just don't regress. Like, and I guess focus on getting the whole team involved more as a means to lessen the load on him throughout the regular season. So then he can be as fresh as possible for the playoffs. Again, not that I think that he wasn't fresh for the playoffs this past year. He played all the minutes he did during the regular season last year, took on all the scoring load and everything else, and yet was never any worse for it in the playoffs. He was still the fantastic player that you wanted him to be the entire time. Um, but I just think it would be good, honestly, for everybody else's benefit to work out, ways to bail Brunson out. If, when defenses start, keying in more during the postseason, make sure you have, a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, plan E, and a plan F on any given possession. And you have the offensive talent on this team to make that happen now. You have 5-out shooting that you can do right from the rip. And, maybe Josh Hart is the question mark there, but you can field a lineup where you have 5 roughly 40% 3-point shooters on the floor at once, where you have Brunson, Deuce, Mikal, OG, and Cat, which is crazy. That's not something that the Knicks have ever had, like ever. Like this is actually the first time that they've ever really had a true 5-out offense on their team, which is going to be crazy to see. So, learning how to take advantage of that with Brunson and, just developing all the backup plans and making it so that he doesn't have to be the guy that scores you 40 something points every single postseason game, that he can just do that a few times and then otherwise scores normal 20 something and Cat can score 35 or whatever. I think that should be the goal for this year. Just work on letting Brunson still do everything that he does well, but also trying to figure out ways for everybody else to get just as involved too and create that playoff chemistry that you need. My realistic expectation for this year for him, I think he's going to be an all-star. I think he's going to be All-NBA again. I think he's possibly going to be the MVP if things break right. I think if the Knicks somehow turn into the number 1 seed in the East, or even if they're just a dominant number 2 seed that presses Boston throughout the year and, makes them at least look down the standings a little bit, I think there's a real chance that he wins MVP if he does the same thing that he did last year or improves on it a little bit. Like if he gets his scoring average up over 30 points per game and he, averages, I don't know, 7 assists or something like that, and does it with the same efficiency and does it for a team that wins like 57 games or something like that and is the number 2 seed, yeah, I think there's a real chance he wins MVP. I think no matter what, he's a top 5 finisher. But other than that, like, yeah, he all-star berth almost guaranteed, All NBA. I don't want to say guaranteed, but if he keeps up doing what he did last year, almost guaranteed. He's going to be a phenomenal player, and I'm extremely excited to watch him do it again this year. And luckily, we're not too far off from that. We got the final preseason game coming up, and then regular season starts next week. The Knicks get to hopefully spoil ring night in Boston and the opening contest of the NBA season. So we got a lot to look forward to. But till then, thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace out.